Hey, folk. All right. Hi, people. So this is one of the first Facebook Lives that I'm doing. Tarun approached me and asked me to speak to people about the subject of media management in these times, which is definitely a task by itself because most people don't even want to listen to you, right? Uh, I don't think my parents want to listen to me at this point of time, the amount of stress that everybody goes through. But yes, happy to answer all questions. Happy to be able to assist. I'm Sandeep Rao. I am the CEO of a consultancy called One Source. I also happen to run the. I also happen to have the unenviable task of running an industry forum of about 10,200 odd for the last 6 years, along with a great team, right? We bring together a lot of close to about 2.5, 3,000 journalists. We bring together about 2.5, 3,000 corporate communication professionals, and we've got about 5.5, 6,000 agency folk. So that's about it from my end. I will now turn the conversation over to you. And I hope everyone can hear me. And I will now turn the conversation over to you for questions. If there's anything that we can answer. If not, I will. It's 2 minutes and 11 seconds right now. I'll wait till about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and then I will start rambling. All right, then. I had been forewarned by Tarun of white noises. Uh, okay. So one of the biggest challenges, firstly, is there a way of finding out that I am audible? Tarun, could you please place it on the chat that I am indeed audible, please? Would that be possible? Okay. Okay. In absentia of any comments, allow me to start. Uh, One of the biggest challenges that all of us have been facing. As a matter of fact, this is one of the reasons that I could not do dummy today as well. Uh, the Newspapers Association has come together and announced that the circulation of news media, the circulation of PDFs is something. Okay, I have been asked to check the comments section. I don't see comments here as yet. Uh, just a second, please. Okay, there seems to be a challenge in the comments section. Okay. Below depend you have taken up. Okay, so there seems to be a spot of a challenge as far as the questions are concerned. I don't seem to have the questions coming in. I think Tarun and I are working on sorting that piece out. But in the interim, do allow me to regale you with something that is unfortunate that has happened. The Newspapers Association has come together. They've announced that sharing of PDFs in these times when print copies are not possible, uh, sharing of PDFs is a little difficult. Okay. So the first question is in how differently is media functioning today vis-a-vis in the pre-COVID era? So one of the first things that's happening is the fact that the media has typically moved from a print module to an online module, which means the amount of space has increased, right? Where earlier you would see maybe 300 stories in on the average newspaper, today you're seeing 300 stories churned out in 2 hours. Effectively, that means that the pressure is on media to churn out more stories. Please remember that the larger the number of stories, the higher up the website also goes on SEO rankings, right? So the moment that happens, journalists are under a lot of pressure to do multiple stories at any given point of time. Because of COVID, what's also happened is that edit meets that earlier took place with the journalists and the beat editors and the editors at large, which earlier took place at say 11 in the morning or 10 in the morning, are now actually taking place anywhere between 6 to 8 in the morning. There are two financial publications that I know of. I won't go into whether they are dailies or periodicals that are actually doing edit meets at 7:30 in the morning every day, right? So there were earlier journalists who managed to take calls very early in the morning, and some very senior journalists who used to say, please call me very early in the morning because that's the only time that I'm free. At this point of time, however, all of that has changed. A better mode of communicating with journalists has all of a sudden become email, has become WhatsApp, has become messaging, though I guess none of us happen to use messaging at this point of time, right? So the media is fast evolving, and this change is not going to go back to where it was earlier. It's going to stay. It's here to stay. In the USA and the UK, for example, the best way to reach out to the media is via Twitter, right? So having to use digital mediums instead of voice calls is here, and it's going to stay as far as the times are concerned. The next question that I've received is, in a digital world, truly how much impact does the E in peso have? Okay, so earned media typically works basis relationships, right? I was planning to address this. One of the key things that we've seen, and of the 34 people that I see live right now, I'm pretty sure at least 30 have faced this challenge, right, when they started their career, of their bosses coming across and saying, and pardon my going bilingual here, I will translate this into English for those of you who can't understand Hindi. आज बजट डे है, प्लीज कॉल ऑल द जर्नलिस्ट एंड मेक श्योर कि हमारा कवरेज आता है. Translating that bilingualism completely into English, today is budget day, or today is RBI policy day. Please call up the banking editor of a leading financial and make sure our coverage comes across. Now let me be very honest with you here. If you're going to call the banking editor of an Economic Times, of a Business World, of any publication under the sun on budget day, on policy day, right, on any of these important days, you're going to get slammed. Okay, so the best way to reach out to, in fact, the digital age has given us certain advantages that we otherwise did not have. There was a point of time when landlines and voice calls were the only way of reaching out to journalists, or of course, you could go across and meet them. Today, we have Facebook, we have Twitter. In fact, most journalists don't prefer Facebook, but you have Twitter, you have SMS, you have WhatsApp. It is better to be considerate of journalists at this point of time, and the digital world gives you the tools to do so. Right. What kind of topics will the media be interested in after COVID? Asks Khushbu. Okay. One of the standard questions that we've been getting on the forum, and I'm going to refer to one source, the forum, very regularly, because the moment you put 10,000 industry professionals on the forum, when you put 10,000 PR people, corporate communication people, marketers, digital marketers, when you put brands there, as well as PR people there, all of a sudden you've got a motley mix of people who represent each side, right? So when you ask what kind of topics the media will be interested in, I'll be honest with you. One of the things that I've told my teams at the consultancy that I run is focus on topicality, right? You cannot speak to the media about uh, how the let me put it this way, how the healthcare industry will flourish during times of COVID. Okay, it sounds heartless, to be very frank with you. You cannot speak to them about how in 2025, let me give you a very factual example. The multi-trillion dollar economy that we were speaking about, as far as India was concerned, the digital economy, you can't go and speak to them about that right now unless you drive in the topicality of how COVID has led to people not interacting person to person. They are interacting more digitally, which means that the chances of the digital economy growing faster increase. Right now, when that happens, that's a possibility. But you can't speak directly to $1 trillion economy. You cannot speak directly uh, about manufacturing stories. You can't speak directly because most people in the manufacturing sector are doing stories only about how India's loss is China's gain. Sorry, China's loss is India's gain. So most people have grown extremely distrustful of our neighbors of China automatically. And China was at one point of time called the manufacturing hub of the world. Now, if you need to position a story around manufacturing, you need to mention how China is going to lose out. And it's a fact. It's a fact. There have been industry reports. There have been reports in earned media that speak about this. You need to go across and speak about how China's loss of trust is India's gain, where Indian manufacturers can take up these contracts. If you're talking about the auto industry, you need to speak about how once COVID lifts, most people towards uh, are going to move towards personal vehicles because there is going to be a loss of trust in public transport, right? If you're speaking about restaurants, you need to speak about how the delivery industry, which has taken a hit right now but still falls under the purview of essential services, you need to talk to food and beverage journalists about how the cloud kitchen industry, the dark kitchen industry, the delivery industry is going to boom, right? As sick as we are of the fact that we need to sit at home, as sick as we are of the fact that we cannot move out, uh, we're not just going to walk out, right? We're not going to walk out and have a party because all of a sudden there is a certain amount of fear, right? And it's playing on the minds of the people. Therefore, it's important to be able to share topical information, information that is pertinent, information that fits in and is important from the COVID perspective at this point of time, right? The next question that I see here is what is the latest announcement on newspaper PDFs by the Newspaper Association? Okay, so and I've received a slew of questions, so I'm going a little slower in order to be able to explain these to you, right? There's been an announcement that says that newspaper PDFs cannot be shared at this point of time. Going forwards from tomorrow, right? It's been covered by the Divya Bhaskar. It's been covered by a few smaller websites such as News Baba, right? But I've been coming across it pretty actively, and a lot of members of the PR fraternity are worried. The question being asked is, if I do not get PDFs, how do I track my news, right? I would urge all the viewers on this Facebook Live to think bigger, right? I would urge you to think about uh, if I do not get PDFs. Firstly, if I do not get PDFs, how do I get to know story formats in print? Okay, Because what a lot of us often do not realize is that the same story is printed differently is published differently in print, is published differently in online. All right. And an age old learning that those of us, well, who functioned in PR in the I would say in the late 2000s and the early 2000s, was read your newspapers every day, right? We used to call it newspaper tracking. And we were encouraged to, because it helped us understand how people wrote, what their style of writing was, right? So it is going to be extremely important, not only for media tracking, but for media relations, to understand, uh, to figure out how this PDF business is going to work. There are multiple industry associations in conversation right now with multiple media houses trying to figure this out. The advantage with industry forums, for example, uh, on one source, the forum, we've got pretty much every media house that you can think of, right? We've got Times, we've got ET, we've got the six financial papers, we've got all the magazines, we've got each and every mainline, we've got international media such as BBC, National, Washington Post, etc. And the advantage is that the print journalists, right, the journalists from each of these publications are sharing their the PDFs of their publications themselves. So, for example, there is somebody from the Financial Express who actually shares, I think, 9 editions of the Financial Express daily, right, on the forum, and we try and bring it across to each of our members, right? The next question is, how does one go about pitching a recovery story at a time when everything is so negative? Chetali, I'll be very honest. I don't see a recovery story. There will be the stray happy stories, right? I was incidentally a journalist when the 2008 financial crisis hit, and a good I would say month and a half into the financial crisis, going like the financial state of the country going down south in 2008, uh, our editor came across to us and said, okay, we need to do happy stories, right? We need to do stories about hope. What will happen, and this goes out to all those people who are listening, there are going to be a lot of negative stories. 80% of stories are going to be on the and quote unquote impact of COVID on X industry, on Y industry, on Z industry, right? At this point of time, if there are human interest stories, right? If you can figure out the if you can associate with other PR consultancies and figure out, if you're handling, for example, say if you're handling a food delivery brand, or if you're handling a restaurant, if you can speak to 5 other restaurants, figure out how it is that they're helping pay their staff's salaries, then that's a story that you can take to the media, right? They're willing to do happy stories. Honestly speaking, at this point of time, I don't see recovery stories coming along willy-nilly, right? The next question that I have is from, allow me this, is how do we enhance exchange of information between Indian PR fraternity to showcase examples of what kind of global media stories are working? My God, that's a very lengthy question, Pooja, but allow me to attempt an answer. Okay, so the advantage that has taken place, and I'm going to compare two crises here, the 2008 financial crisis and the current crisis. Right, the current crisis is healthcare, is socio-economic, is financial, is spread across the gamut. Right, and so was 2008, as a matter of fact. Right, the advantage that has come across since then is that a lot of global media have grown in strength in India, right? Quartz, BBC World, right? The National, CNNI, and the international version edition of CNN. There's a lot of correspondents who have come in. There's a lot of editorial who have come in from international publications, and it is easier for those people to understand stories that are being done internationally. One of the key things that I do generally, and this is just a tip for those of you who wish to take it, there was an article done by a columnist called Andy Mukherjee, right, about how COVID is I think a multi-trillion-dollar gig economy loan buster, a gig loan economy buster. Basically, it said small loans are going to be extremely difficult to service. So people who take small loans, say these are either called micro loans in the microfinance segment, or they're called small loans. They're typically loans of 5,000 to 7,000 that are given to daily wage workers, and they pay them off in very, very tiny amounts, right? And Andy Mukherjee had written about how if a daily wage worker is not allowed to work, how will he service that loan? Which effectively means that microfinance institutions, that banks which service what is called the priority sector lending (PSL), right? These sectors are going to go for a toss. Uh, a lot of banking loans are going to go bad, right? So my point is, Andy had spoken about how this is happening globally as well. Now, if we can position these aspects, something that I personally do, no journalist I have found has a problem referring or reading news on other publications in order to understand the subject better, right? I was a television news journalist myself. We were actually asked to track other television news channels to see what we had missed out. Okay, so if you can turn around and tell X publication that Y has done this story, did you know how interesting it is? And this is the topical COVID impact of this, right? It could be an Indian publication, it could be an international publication. Please understand, news is not Indian, international, Sri Lankan, Pakistani. It's news, right? It's facts. Opinions can change, okay, but facts never do. They're facts, they're right there. So if you can pitch them, even if you decide to bring in the fact that out of say 7.5 million people, billion people globally, more than half are currently under lockdown, that's international implication that you have brought to an Indian story, right? Next question, and I think I'm going to have to speed up my answers. Modi, how are you? Has the relevance of op-ed articles in COVID times amplified? What's the real picture? Okay, so there are two aspects to this. I feel a lot of media have started taking more authored articles. Okay, it's funny to see this, but authored articles were considered at one point of time, and I'm going to go Hindi here again. Oh my God, आपने authored article crack कर लिया, right? There's this op-ed editor of a leading financial daily, and I have a feeling I'm going to put a smile on several faces here, though I can't see them unfortunately. But there's the op-ed editor of a leading financial daily who is renowned for not taking calls, not responding to messages, not responding to mails. Right? His number is circulated, but he doesn't respond to any form of media. Right? And I guess all of us know that person, and I think it's their prerogative. I think they have a right to do it, because it's a well-known fact in the same breath that when our fraternity gets the number of a person, they start haranguing them, right? They start calling them like there's no tomorrow. They forget that the other person also has deadlines. But to come back to the question that Mo asked, Mo is with Deloitte. The question that Modi asked, the question that Mo asked, yes, authored articles are becoming important. The number of authored articles has also increased dramatically. The reason is people want perspective. People want others in positions of authority, in positions of power, if I may, who can calm them down. And from a media perspective, it's from a media house perspective, it's giving your reader what they want. Well, also fact of the matter is that in the digital age, news media needs to churn out information as fast as possible. And authored articles are a lovely way of ensuring that you get content that you can put out. And it's not an interview that you have to spend time on, right? I don't know whether there are any people from the media fraternity on this chat, and I don't know whether I'm going to get lambasted, but if I am, I'm available at 97690799273. Please take it up with me personally, not on any public forum, right? I get enough of that bashing on a regular basis. Okay, but on a funny note, it's two pronged. Media will look at more authored articles, but please, they will look at quality authored articles. Please do not go to them with with how OTT is booming and therefore uh, uh, you know the Bollywood needs to look more at OTT and less at at mainstream cinema or something. Please don't go to them with something frivolous. That was a bad example, but please don't go to them with something frivolous. Times are deep, times are dark, times there's doom, there's gloom. Please go to them with something that is topical. All right. But yes, to answer the question, the relevance of op-ed articles has increased. The next question is from Nitin. What is the best way to increase your journalist database in terms of email? There is no way. Okay, I'm really sorry, Nitin. I have tried figuring this one out. There is no way. Uh, I get I get at least 8 to 10 calls in a day, and 8 to 10, or I think close to 15 emails in a day, saying, "Sir, ये story cover कर लीजिए." Right? And the funny part is that I was a journalist more than a decade ago, right? So if I take the call and I make sure I take the call, right? So I'll take the call and I'll say, sir, आप कहाँ से call कर रहे हैं? मैं XYZ agency या brand से call कर रहा हूँ. Okay, and where did you get this number from? I got it on a media list on a forum called One Source, right? So there is no particular way that you can database something. Media is dynamic. Any database is dynamic. Humankind is dynamic. If you actually want a database, and I wouldn't restrict it only to email, if you want a database, my request to each and every one of you, and not only to the person who asked the question, read regularly. Okay, there are people who ask on the forum, are there stories on COVID getting? Who can somebody share a list of journalists doing stories on COVID? दोस्त कोई भी न्यूज मीडिया खोल लीजिए open the website of any news media. You will find everybody is doing stories on COVID, right? The editor of a financial daily, the editor in chief of a financial daily recently told me that we have gone all hands on board. All hands on board is typically a situation when everybody is covering a particular phenomenon or a particular topic of import, right? It could be an RBI policy and its impact on various sectors. It could be the budget and its impact on various sectors. It could be COVID, right? So if you're talking about the manufacturing beat, the lifestyle beat, the auto beat, the sports beat, everybody is currently covering COVID, right? The number of stories on online sports surprisingly has increased dramatically, right? Simply because, well, there's that many stories that you can do about cricket, right? I mean, as a cricket fanatic myself. Next question. You mentioned WhatsApp. Do reporters really like getting pinged on WhatsApp? Nitin again. Okay, so use it's not what medium you use, Nitin. Folk, it's not what medium you use. It is how intelligently you use it, right? If you're going to continuously send somebody, and this is not at the question, at the person who's asked the question, this is to all of us. If we, as a matter of fact, if we continuously send WhatsApp messages to somebody who is not responding, they're going to block us. Okay, quick tip here, and please remember this. This is something that I've told each and every team I've worked with in the last decade and a half. Please do not call a journalist for at least 3 hours after you have sent them a pitch note, unless the news is breaking. Please do not. Please do not. Okay. Just imagine, I was a journalist that long ago. I still get about 15 pitch notes a day, right? That's 15, 6, and 90. That's more than 100 pitch notes in a week that I get, and I just have to delete. And I'm not even a journalist, right? Journalists get thousands of pitch notes in a day. One of the best ways, whether it is WhatsApp, whether it is email, whether it is any form of written communication, if you want them to read your email, if you want them to respond on WhatsApp, make sure that you involve the basic keywords, right? A keyword is not press release, a keyword is not exclusive, right? Out of the 15 pitch notes that I get in a day, at least 8 have exclusive on the subject line. I'm not interested in an exclusive. I'm interested in, is the news important for me? Everybody says it's an exclusive, right? So please make sure that if you want responses, whether on email, whether on WhatsApp, please make sure that you include the right keywords, right? If you're pitching to a startup journalist, exclusive XYZ organization raises X amount of funds. The answer to the sentence to put is XYZ funds have been raised by XYZ in the email subject line, right? Because the journalist will see the funds, they won't read the entire sentence, they won't even have the time, they won't be able to read the entire sentence. What you need to do is mention what the funds is. Raising funds at this point of time is difficult. Any journalist is interested in an organization that has been able to raise funds. Bring out, think like a journalist if you want a response from them. The question is not WhatsApp pay response, email pay response. The question is getting the response, right? I'm really going to have to shorten these because I'm getting a lot of questions, and I'm very thankful to you. Do Indian journalists prefer being contacted on Twitter? This is from Tarun. I have used it successfully, right? But not openly on Twitter. I'm not very savvy with Twitter as such. I use it more to shadow people, right? But I send them direct messages on Twitter, and I have found it is extremely successful, simply because uh, Twitter is, Twitter is at the crossroads between personal and professional. If you ping them on Facebook, they're going to get irritated, right? I have people who ping me on Facebook saying, ये story कर दीजिए. I'm like, Facebook is where I connect with family and friends, right? This is not where I need to be connected with on as far as work is concerned. But the moment, and that's kind of a dichotomy because I'm doing a professional thing on Facebook Live. But jokes apart, Twitter, if you send them a direct message, most journalists may or may not respond depending on the relationship that you share with them. If you do not know, I'm going to take journalist names here and among friends, right? Ruchika Shah, the digital editor of Forbes, is a very dear friend. If I ping her on Twitter, she will respond. If I did not know her at all and I decided to ping her on Twitter, she would mostly not respond. Okay, wondering who is this and why are they pinging me? Okay. The next question is, do you think there is a shift in the PR from traditional to new media in the film marketing plan? And if yes, what are the reasons for this? Okay, I'm not sure whether this film marketing plan refers to entertainment, the entertainment space, but allow me to try that question. Yes, there is a shift to traditional media. The best thing to do for people right now would be to start explaining to your clients that stop saying print, right? I'm not going to take the name of the organization here, organizations here, but I have dealt with God knows how many clientele, and I believe all of us have. I don't know how many people are online and whether I have a lag right now, but I see 34 people watching this. I don't know how many of us have actually had clients say, and I'm going to do this in Hindi and English, right? Because I usually used to get it in Hindi. मुझे प्रिंट में कवरेज चाहिए, पेज 4 ऑफ इकोनॉमिक टाइम्स में आधा पेज का कवरेज चाहिए विथ माय फेस ऑन इट एंड माय एमडी's फेस ऑन इट, right? Or rather, and my chairman's face on it. And there was a point of time when online wasn't taken that seriously, right? And I'm going to translate this quickly in English. I'd like to see my chairman's face, and this might be the CEO speaking. I'd like to see my chairman's face and my face on page 4 of the Economic Times, and it needs to be a half-page story, right? Now, rather than getting irritated with clients, an important thing to do is to educate them, right? It's very easy to get irritated with a CEO of a client and say, you don't understand that, this is not how it works. We can't decide the size of media. We can't decide which page it appears on. Or in case of entertainment PR, we can't ensure that it will appear on X page of the Bombay Times. The Bombay Times, of course, has been shrunk and has been combined with sister supplement. But this is the time for you to turn around and say that today's newspaper, and I'm going to say this very openly, today's newspaper is tomorrow's. Most of us in our agencies, I've seen a lot of agencies do this, and I personally find it kind of disrespectful, right? But a lot of agencies during lunch they'll sit together and the table in the conference room for those of us who have lunch in conference room, it will be covered with newspapers, right? We earn our living with newspapers, right? So we shouldn't be eating on it. I mean, that's just a personal opinion, but yeah, this is a good time to tell our clients that today's newspaper just maybe tomorrow's table mat at some agency or some firm. Focus on online. Online has longevity, right? Online has no dearth of space. Online, you can read it today, you will still see it 30 years down the line, unless you have to get it taken off, of course. But you will see it 30 years down the line, hopefully. Print, you will see it today, you will forget it tomorrow, right? Vanity metrics, this is the best time for us to advise our clientele to get out of the thought process of focusing on vanity metrics. Okay, so yes, there is a shift in PR from traditional to new media, and it's extremely important for us to focus on that, right? A last example I'm going to give, and new media doesn't only encompass online versions of the media. For example, if you're doing an industry report, if you're doing PR for an industry report, right? Do a do an exclusive. Break the report down into 4 parts. Do 4 exclusives, right, for each of those parts. Then do a webinar, and I'm just thinking aloud here. Maybe a lot of you have better ideas, right? Uh, then do a webinar with maybe 10 different journalists and bring them onto one platform, a Facebook Live or whatever it is, or maybe a Zoom link, and get your CEO to do a digital press conference. Then take insights from that report, put it out on Facebook, put it out on Twitter, right? Use it in your emailers, right? Use insights from that in your emailer, right? Use it in your other clients' pitches, other clients from the same sector. You'd be surprised to know how many places it will get picked up and the kind of visibility it will get. One of the things that I've been saying for the last decade is that visibility is not about appearing in a newspaper. It is about 360-degree visibility across peso media, which is paid, earned, shared, owned, right? So in answer to Shreya's question, yes, there is a shift from traditional to otherwise. And yes, we need to evolve very, very fast, right? And the next question is how to plan pitch positive stories for hospitality with journalists. Manisha asks this. Manisha, at this point of time, the only positive stories you're going to see for the hospitality sector are if your clientele are actually, and they might be, right? They might be, but I know of enough instances where clientele aren't, where brands aren't. But if your clients are actually making the effort to make sure that their staff are paid and taken care of, that's a positive human story. If there is a story that needs to be pitched about how the hospitality industry will boom after COVID goes away because people will want to travel, it's not going to fly. Most journalists are very aware of the fact that the fear psychosis has set in. Even after the lockdown is lifted, a lot of us may not exactly want to travel out and visit hotels and go abroad and travel simply because there is the worry, right? And that's going to take some time. So those positive stories won't happen, are not around the corner. Do journalists prefer being connected and having conversations over LinkedIn? LinkedIn is primarily not for pitching stories, okay? A small request to all the PR people, all the comms people out there, please do not use Facebook for pitching stories. It makes, when 10 people do it to one journalist, the journalist thinks the entire fraternity does this, right? We get blacklisted as a fraternity. Do not do it over Facebook. As far as LinkedIn is concerned, LinkedIn is not meant for pitching stories. If you plan to make a switch from PR to journalism, yes, you can reach out to a journalist there. I have done it, right? When I wanted to shift from PR to journalism, LinkedIn didn't exist at that point of time. I reached out to Mr. Govindraj Ethiraj over GChat. Okay, I have no shame taking his name simply because the gentleman is a mentor and a very dear friend. I reached out to him over GChat and asked him if I could come across and meet. He responded. So please be sensitive about where a journalist wants to be connected with what, right? The critical three rules of communication, and I follow the three rules, the rule of three very strongly. What are you speaking? What are you saying? Who are you saying it to? And where are you saying it? Okay, these three things, please, please remember them. What are you saying? Which means what is your messaging? Where are you saying it? Which means what is the platform? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Facebook? Is it WhatsApp? Is it email? Is it in person? Is it over the phone? And who are you saying it to? Your target audience, right? Once you have these three aligned, most communication I've found is very well received, right? Next question. Uh, okay, so this was a question that was asked both by Pooja and Kushbu. I seem to have answered that. Next question is, how does one work on media relations in a lockdown? Okay, so media relations is one of the things that I've found is that if you speak to people that you already know, right, in media houses, if you speak to people that you already know in media houses about what kind of stories are being done, it becomes very easy to understand what stories are being done in the rest of the publication, right? So if I know a beat journalist for say a particular beat in a publication, I'll just turn around and ask them, okay, I've just got on board this new client and they're in XYZ beat. Who do I speak to, and pretty much who do I speak to regarding them? Once I know that, I will go back and research what kind of stories that person is doing, and then I will pitch those stories, right? The best way to build media relations is pitching relevant stories. It's not ingratiating yourself with journalists. It's more about understanding the media's psyche, the journalist's psyche. Okay. What is your advice on journalists who name and shame PR people? Refrain from plugging. Okay, so no, Tarun. So the reason I'm using one so often, and I'll avoid that, is specifically because it brings a lot of people together, and it gives me an opportunity to understand industry as a whole. Right? It's where I draw a wealth of information from. What is your advice on journalists who name and shame PR people, Chaitali? Naming and shaming of any variety is incorrect, right? We have journalists who put up uh, okay, who put up queries on public forums, right, on industry forums, and they very specifically write, PR agencies do not need to apply for this. I would like to speak only with brands, right? They do this once, they do this twice, they do this thrice. If I am admin of such an industry forum, I have a word with them the first time, have a word with them the second time. The third time round, I respectfully tell them that the this particular forum that I manage, it brings people together. I'll have to move you out, right? That is why I said at the outset that it's a very unenviable position to be the admin of any kind of industry forum, because it leads to problems with journalists as well. But we try and make sure that we find a balance. Like naming and shaming in any variety is incorrect. Public humiliation does not work, right? I've always believed very strongly in the process of praise in public, reprimand in private. Okay, the only time I will reprimand in public is if I feel the error has been repeated so many times that it might lead to a trend. An incident should never lead to a trend unless it is a positive incident. Okay, and if it is happening multiple times, then that needs to be taken care of. Okay. Hospitality stories, Manisha, I've just answered this question. How can we help freelancers in the media fraternity to enable them to get out more stories, considering that's essential for them? Okay, so I honestly haven't dealt, I have several friends who are freelance journalists, but apart from those friends, I don't have the opportunity to pitch stories that often to freelance journalists, and I don't know whether my team does or not. But there are certain freelance journalists on forums that I'm a part of, right? They write for Forbes, they write for HT, they write for ET. Typically speaking, freelance journalists put it out on various industry forums that they're taking part. They're writing XYZ stories, and they would like to they would like PR people to reach out to them. That's one way I've found. Honestly speaking, I am a very strong believer of beat journalists. No disrespect to freelance journalists. I have freelanced for a couple of publications in the past as well, or rather, not freelanced. I've been asked to write guest articles for publications in the past as well, and I don't see, if the person wants to be reached out to, they will put it out there. There are enough mediums to put out there, and you can reach out to them. Is blogging and reaching out to bloggers still relevant for corporates? Blogging falls under the purview of paid, earned, shared, owned. It's not earned media per se, right? Because bloggers either charge, or in case Pratibha, you are a blogger and you don't charge, kudos to you. You need to tell me how you're figuring out the monetization aspect. But blogging is relevant. It does impact. A 360-degree approach to communication is important. Okay, communication is not about media relations. Okay, communication is not about media management. Communication is 360-degree, right? In today's day and age, a well written, well placed blog is equal to a well made animated video on LinkedIn, is equal to a well placed story in a leading publication. Each of these have equal clout. None of them is less than the other. Okay, especially with Cat A Media. This is Chaitali. PR face challenge them picking our calls and our ready-made quotes that we provide. In this COVID, how do we make sure our quote is carried, or how do we tap journalists? Okay, so I'm going to give the example, a personal example here. I recently happened to speak to the editor of a mainline publication, and he said, "Did you know that 80% of the quotes that I get are plugs?" Okay, a plug is something where uh, the let me give you an example. If the RBI comes out with something that is very banking focused, and all of a sudden a technology provider for banks decides to jump in and share their quote, right? And this happens often enough. Each of us on this live know that each of us has done it in the past. So my earnest request is to avoid it, right? But if you're going to plug something that does not fit in, it's not going to happen. Okay, find relevance. Find relevance. A fintech player speaking about microloans will not work. A fintech player speaking about microloans in the digital space, and how in the absence of brick and mortar banks have seen that many footfalls in villages. If you can speak about how fintech can drive financial inclusion, if fintech can make sure that the loan economy continues, right? And this is a quote that you share basis an RBI announcement on loans. Now that's going to get picked up. Okay. But if you're going to share how a technology player says banks are slowly pivoting to digital loans and we are providing them with the IT infrastructure for that, no, boss, I'm not going to pick it up. Right. And when I say I represent a majority of media houses that I speak with. They're not going to pick it up. Three key things to remember when interacting with journalists during the lockdown. Okay. Number one, topicality. Make sure you're talking about topicality. You cannot talk about the beauty of Bali to a travel and tourism journalist. The journalist is going to ask you, really? Really, do you think I care about traveling to Bali right now? Right? So, topicality is extremely important. Second point, empathy. Unless you're empathetic to the journalist, unless you understand that they're pretty much filing 2 to 3 stories in an hour. Okay, they're filing 2 to 3 stories in an hour. Each story on an average has 2 to 3 perspectives, which means they're speaking to at least 6 to 8 people minimum in an hour. This is apart from the media calls that the PR calls that they're getting, that people like us happen to make it, right? Can you imagine having 8 conversations of 3 minutes each? That's 24 minutes gone. Apart from that, say you get another 10 calls, which you, half of which you receive, half of which you don't. You've lost 40 minutes straight out there. Now you have to file 2 to 3 stories in the remaining 10 to 15 minutes. your editor is going to kill you, right? So please make sure that you're empathetic, right? So there's topicality, there is empathy, and the third is depth of knowledge. Don't just say that, and that's how I put it: topicality, empathy, depth of knowledge. It actually becomes TED, right? So that's another funda that I followed. That's again three things. That's a rule of three. But depth of knowledge of what the journalist is writing about, generally writes about, and the depth of knowledge about the subject is extremely important. So please keep that in mind. Okay. I've got 10 minutes left, so I'm quickly going to hurry through the questions, and those that have been asked, again, I'm kind of going to avoid. Vinod, I hope that answers your question. Topicality, empathy, depth of knowledge. Depth of knowledge is knowledge across, right? Your client, the industry they represent, the journalist's beat, the journalist's stories, all of that. Okay. So Yasin asked me, hi Yasin, how are you? Congratulations. We will discuss later on what, but we haven't had a conversation to discuss it after. But uh, on what is your take on the sudden increase in paid articles over online/offline media? We see a lot of local online media sending mails to agencies or clients for interviews, articles at a price of just 2 to 5,000. This demotivates the team and their effort over trying too hard to crack a story. Isn't this hampering the industry with just paid articles? I'll be very honest with you. I find it, and I'm going to be very blunt here. There is no problem in paying for an article, okay? But if the article mentions that it is a paid article, then it is not cheating its audience. Okay, we've had a series of publications on forums that I take care of who have joined saying we will get in touch with PR people and we will provide them stories. And then we realize that they only approach PR people for paid articles. And the best part is they'll take 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, up to even 30, 40, 50,000, and they will do a story that does not mention that it's a paid article. I'm going to be very blunt here. We've kicked such people, such journalists off the forum, right? You cannot cheat your audience. Please do not cheat your audience. If your audience is journalists, please don't cheat them. If your audience is your client, please do not cheat them, right? If your audience is the reader, please do not cheat them into believing that an article is is something that is relevant and is earned by dint of being factual, whereas actually it has been paid off, right? So no, paid articles is fine. Paid articles that do not mention that they are paid, major challenge as far as I'm concerned. Next question from Michelle: what do I do if I know the media is busy but my client doesn't want to listen and wants a status? Won't that ruin my media relations? Yes, I have lost relationships such as that. It is important, therefore, to give the client factual data. The one of the things that I learned as and I'm still a bacha, I continue to learn. But when I say bacha, I mean as a kid in the industry who started out say 14, 15 odd years ago. One of the things that somebody taught me right at that point of time was make sure you have friends in every media house who give you the actual real live situation inside the newsroom, right? So, for example, there have been clients who have come back saying, why can't a story on employee engagement be filed during COVID times? And I spoke to a few people at media houses and they said, boss, what employee engagement? Yeah. I mean, most of our employee engagement currently is digital, is online. You can't speak about live images just because your client is in the essential services, right? So when you go back and you give real-time live information to the client is very often willing to listen. There are unreasonable clients, I'm not denying that, but more often than not, if you can give them a live feed into the lives of journalists and into the newsroom, they're more than willing to listen. Okay. So starting today, PDF of newspapers will not be available. How will that work in newspapers' favors? Will subscriptions not, with subscriptions not being honored and red zones in play, how will this work? Okay. Thank you for that question, Taran. It's a very pertinent point because it's come about today. Tomorrow onwards, we're going to stop circulation of PDFs across all forums, or rather, I would advise everybody, and all of us are part of various WhatsApp forums, Facebook forums, a multitude of forums. Please advise admin in each of these places not to circulate PDFs, right? You don't want the cops coming knocking at your door You don't want anybody coming knocking at your door. How does it benefit publications? Subscriptions are being honored. The thing is that the subscriptions are being honored for certain publications. I won't go into the detailing of which publications, but certain publications which are widely read, which are the largest read, they are honoring their subscriptions. Others are not being able to. This is a question of those publications which are have the bandwidth and have the ability to pressurize people to deliver papers, them making sure that their papers get read, others getting stuck beyond. Right? It's a policy conversation among news media. It's not something that is targeted at consumers or readers, right? Okay, next question, and I've got 5 minutes and about 20 seconds left. Uh, Thank you, Bhushan, for that. I just saw Bhushan writing, agreed, reading is a must for all. Ready-made stuff available online on different forums makes newcomers in industry lazy. Yes, I do agree. I I am beg pardon. I am myself culpable of the fact, right, that I circulate a lot of information. Excuse me. I am for those of you who intend to have a good laugh. That was black coffee, not anything else, right? Uh, I am myself culpable of sharing a lot of information on various fora. The problem is that it does make people lazy, right? Uh, Admin on various forums have been told, boss, you share so much information, my people don't go out and read. It makes them lazy. The idea is not to make people lazy, I'll be very honest. And it is unfortunate that it does. So, yes, Bhushan, it's a very valid point. It's a point spot on, and I do agree with you. The idea is to share information from the admin's perspective or the fora's perspective. From the reader's perspective, it's an earnest request. Read as much as possible, right? You'd be surprised to know there are several I know, including me, who use examples from popular culture, right? Who use examples from rock music, who use examples from uh, everything from Enid Blyton to Tintin to God knows what else, right? To John Grisham while pitching stories, right? So read, please read. There is no replacement for reading. Ishita asks, what is your advice to PR people who are getting called out by journalists for just doing their jobs? It's very unfair. And I completely agree with you there, Ishita, because we don't go around doing that yet. They feel they have every right to name our peers on a public platform. Ishita, my request is, and I might be called a fool later for this, but I'm still going to go ahead and do this. I'm available on various public fora, right? I'm available on various social media platforms. My number is freely available. Should such a situation arise, please reach out to me. I will make every effort to arbitrate such a situation because I find name calling, naming and shaming a pathetic, low attempt at humiliating people. Okay, this is me saying it on a Facebook Live. And mind you, I'm not speaking only to journalists. I'm speaking to anybody who does name calling. Okay, it could be a PR person doing it for another PR person, and there are enough PR people who do that as well. It could be brands doing it for bloggers, right? It could be bloggers doing it for brands. Anybody who indulges in public naming and shaming, right? Public humiliation. Uh, I personally have an issue with, and I find that it is some form of insecurity that makes them do that. So never let it hit your morale. Ishita is my request, right? Never let it impact you. Modi, thanks for this. Okay. So during many journalists are doing stories around telemedicine. This is Shruti teleconsultation. How do we pitch to the media, which is already being circulated widely in the news? Please figure out what stories are being done, right? If you've missed a story, speak to the journalist, WhatsApp them saying, I loved your story, and actually read that story, right? Please don't just say it for the sake of saying it. There are enough media people who get, I loved your story. Which part of the story did you love? Right? And all of a sudden the person is stuck. And when you don't get a response for about 20 seconds, you know the PR person is frantically reading that story, trying to figure out, okay, which part can I say I love? So please actually read the story. You don't necessarily even have to love the story. You can say, I didn't like this point. I found this point contentious. People like intelligent conversations. So I'm going to take another example here of a very dear friend. If Rishi Alwani at an NDTV Gadgets, or an Abhinav Lal at an NDTV Gadgets, or a Gautam Mengle at a Hindu does a story, and you find that it is something that is relevant for your client, but you were unable to place your client there, reach out to them and say, I have a client here. I figure it may not be possible for you to add this piece right now, but my request to you is, please try and figure out if the next time you're doing such a story, you can keep me in mind. You will build a relationship even if you don't get a story. People like empathy. The three rules: topicality, empathy, depth of knowledge. Right? We're at the 1 hour mark. I'm quickly going to go through the questions and see. I have a question. Okay, Victoria has put in 3 exclamation marks after that. I'm Nigerian based in the States and I run a PR firm. How can I integrate into the Indians and Asian media market? I'm open to synergies. My request is, Victoria, reach out to Tarunjit. Tarunjit is available on this platform. I have already shared my number on this live. I am also available on various platforms. I'm available on +91 97 690 79273. Anybody, you can reach out to a host of admins who take care of various fora. They would be more than happy to connect you with the industry at large, right? I've just shared my number with you. That's my WhatsApp number as well. Tarunjit is very active. She's one of those people who's vivaciously full of energy and enthusiasm, and she connects with a lot of people. I know I've used wrong English there, but if Tarun can help you, I could help you. There's multiple people who can help you. Are media behaving differently with brand representatives and PR professionals during this time? Ishita, I've already answered this question, so I must beg pardon for not taking this up again. How to approach a college friend who's now a journalist and we want to pitch a story? Forget the fact that they're a college friend. Connect with the journalist as a friend first. Don't try and pitch a story to them first up, right? Rekindle that relationship. Let them know you're a PR person. Let them know that you might approach them for a story. One of the things that I very regularly do, okay, uh, I seem to have been very fortunate. I have at least one batchmate from school or college in 80% of media houses, right? I don't know how that worked out, right? From PTI to Times of India to BBC to God knows what else. When I call them for work, the first sentence that I write on WhatsApp is, this is a work conversation. I am not going to take the liberty of going bhai bandhu with you or friendship with you. I'm going to speak strictly work. When it's an off work conversation, and I was having one at 8 in the evening about the absence of, well, forgive those of you who are teetotalers here, but about the shutdown impacting and there being an absence of alcohol all around. And I was having this conversation with a journalist from a global media house, one of the leading global media houses. And I did not try and pitch a story there, right? The journalist covers a very relevant beat for me and for my organization. I did not pitch a story there. It's extremely important to remember not to mix personal and professional. Last question here. How do we sensitize our clients that now is not the time, we can focus only on profiling? Brilliant question, Michelle. This is the last question I'll be able to take. There is a great way I would recommend. Find 5 media who are friends of yours, right? Uh, People who are on the client side, like Modi, and Modi is my elder sister as well, so she's going to slaughter me for this. She works with a consulting firm, right? She heads corporate communication for a consulting firm. She's going to slaughter me for this. But when a client does not listen, not because that consulting firm does not listen, but because she's on the client side, if a client does not listen to you, speak to 5 media, right, who are friends of yours. Send them the pitch. If they do not like it, ask them to be honest with you on their meals, right? Tell them to put down exactly what their feedback is. Take that feedback, share it with the client. Do not disclose name of journalist to client. That is unethical. Okay, the journalist has sent it to you in trust. Do not disclose name of journalist. If you want, you can say that XYZ publication house, we reached out to ABC person and tried to pitch this profiling story. They said We are not interested in profiling the fact that your CEO plays golf and loves Bloody Marys at this point of time, right? So take that. Do not take the name of the journalist, send it across to the client and say, we've pitched it to 5 media. If we pitch it to 5 others, your brand will get a bad name. The CEO or the MD or the spokesperson is going to be seen as heartless, as somebody who is trying to pitch personal profiling at this point of time. Corporate profiling might be possible depending on which industry you're in. If you're pitching a corporate profiling story on the restaurant and on the restaurant industry at a point of time when food and beverage is suffering, that might be possible. Now, it's a person to person thing, right? We're at 5 minutes, 1 hour, 5 minutes and 30 seconds. I would just like to thank everybody for having heard me gab for the last 1 hour. I would like to apologize to admin of PRPOI for the shameless plugs. The idea was to share as much information as possible, but I'm a strong believer of sharing sources of information, right? Without source, it's just my opinion. My opinion should not ideally matter to anybody on this Facebook Live, right? I hope it does not. But yes, the fact that my opinion can be backed by say 10,000, 20,000 people, then my opinion makes sense. Okay, thence the reference to those 10,000 and 20,000 people that you are also a part of. But thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking part in this, and thank you very much, Taranjit and public relations professionals of India for having me here, PRPOI for having me here, and thank you, everyone, for your questions. I am available on the number that I have shared multiple times. Most of you have my number. If somebody does not, please share it in the comments or share my email address in the comments. I'm more than happy to address any questions on DM. Right? That's about it, folk. And I look forward to catching up with you in person very soon. Right? And Taranjit, our coffee or otherwise remains when I visit Bangalore very soon, or when I hope to see you in Delhi very soon. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, folk.